You can now see it. I guess you can all see it. I also want to say thank you for inviting me today and for this kind introduction. I'm also, of course, very happy to be speaking here today, and I would like, as Fergal just hinted at or suggested, like to talk about a project that we are advancing today or these days at the Institute of Education and Culture. And the organization and like the getting started of this project makes up 25% of my employment right now at the university. So that's why I'm here now. The title of my talk is Bildung and Artificial Intelligence, Anthropological Aspects Concerning Higher Education. And this title already displays very much the disciplinary perspective of my working environment, because a large part of the project that I want to present here is concerned with the question how artificial intelligence affects the way or affects what we like to call Bildung, which is the process of taking over responsibility for one's own learning process. And I want to get to that in more detail in a minute, but first I would like to give a short overview of the main features of the project that my work is situated in. And the whole idea that I'm going to present has emerged from our participation in THInKI, which is a collaborative project between the Technical University of Illmenau and the University of Jena. And THInKI, of course, is an acronym, and it stands for Thüringer Hochschulinitiative für KI im Studium. So it is a university initiative for AI in higher education. And THInKI is a project that does not primarily focus on research, but on the further development of higher education in Germany. And the institute, or the chair that I'm working on, we had the idea to take part in this project because we research on Bildung, and the project proposal is explicitly always concerning Hochschulbildung in German. So we wanted to ask the question, what do we want to talk about when we talk about Hochschulbildung and artificial intelligence, and what do also the other participants mean when they want to implement AI in higher education? Now, as you can see here, the project is also funded by the Federal Ministry of Education and Research, and it has a duration until December of 2025. And the goal of this whole project is a joint educational program that covers the entire range. So it says in the project's proposal, it's supposed to cover the entire range of AI technologies and their fields of application, as well in science as in practice. And in addition to technical, mathematical, and informatic basic knowledge of AI, also ethical, social, legal, and pedagogical topics should be covered. And this is where we join in, and it leads me to the next part of my talk, our project on Bildung and Artificial Intelligence at the Chair of Historical Pedagogy. Now, I want to talk about what we consider to be important aspects of Bildung in a philosophical tradition in the context of AI, and I want to later describe how we plan to also empirically explore these ideas and the ideas of all other participating chairs regarding their underlying notion of Bildung. So this part of the presentation is divided into two parts because we are working on two subprojects which have different goals. On the one hand, we intend to integrate the topic of digital education and artificial intelligence into our research and also teaching project. That is a profile. That's basically what I'm going to talk about today. And on the other hand, we also set ourselves the tasks of finding out what the other participants mean when they talk about Bildung. So the first part of our work is about providing a notion of Bildung that we think is appropriate for constructing a whole pedagogical theory that addresses dealing with and also learning about artificial intelligence. Now, on to the first question. Why are we so concerned with the concept of Bildung, and why do we also consider it an important, when it comes to recognizing artificial intelligence as a usual part of everyday life? Now, I know that many of you, probably most, are involved with educational research and already know about this, but I think for the sake of the argument, it's important to emphasize that in the German, the German term Bildung is a rather specific term that was added to the language to denote something that is different from education and also from learning. In German, we say it's different. Bildung is different to Erziehung and also to Lernen. And our perspective at the Chair of Historical Pedagogy is substantially interested in two questions, which are what then is this thing called Bildung, and more importantly, what exactly happens when Bildung is supposedly happening. Now, I will try to answer this question briefly in a historical outlook. So the history of the concept of Bildung is a very long history, and in the course of this history, Bildung has had to stand for many different things. And in a general educational perspective, it has become more and more common to distance oneself from a certain understanding of Bildung. Of course, there are different reasons to distance oneself from different understandings of the term, but I would still like to mention two powerful interpretations of Bildung, which, at least in our eyes, do not seem to be appropriate for our present time, and especially for relating artificial intelligence in the whole context of Bildung. Now, for a long time of the history of Bildung, probably since around 1800, Bildung was understood as the perfection of one's own individuality. So Bildung appeared as the unfolding of one's own potentials and dispositions into one perfect totality. This is an understanding of the term that is closely related to Humboldt's idealism, which is why I put his face on the slide here. And then in the course of the 19th and also the 20th century, as for example, Theodor Adorno shows in his Theorie der Halbbildung, Bildung became equated with a certain body of knowledge or a canon, through the possession of which the educated could distinguish him or herself from the non-educated. So Bildung became some sort of prestigious possession, you could probably say. And I just want to point out that our understanding of Bildung differs from this tradition. Indeed, probably it almost stands in opposition to that. Because in the tradition of enlightenment, which is our perspective, Bildung can be understood as an ethical model as well. And Bildung as an ethical model involves the responsibility of human beings for their own learning. This theory of Bildung is fundamentally committed to important ideas of the Enlightenment as conceived, for example, by Immanuel Kant and also by Moses Mendelssohn, whom you can see on this slide. And on the other hand, this theory of Bildung is also grounded in the philosophical theory of hermeneutics, since Dilthey and Gadamer, and probably also nowadays following Ricoeur, and then my own professor Ralf Koerrenz has his own hermeneutical theory. And anyhow, through this framing, the understanding of Bildung revolves around the question of possibilities and limits of human liberty as well, which go hand in hand, as well as the responsibility of all people for their own actions and for their own learning, as we want to point out. Now, according to this understanding, Bildung implies a certain reflection and shaping of one's own prejudices, or in everyday language, of one's own biases, more precisely, as a self-critical way of dealing with one's own prejudices. Bildung also implies the ability to relate to one's own prejudices, which make up one's own worldview. So in this way, Bildung then appears as a critical relation to one's own learning process. I think I didn't skip anything. Now, I would like to come to the most important point of my presentation today. How does this understanding of Bildung relate to artificial intelligence? And in the picture just outlined, artificial intelligence first appears as an object of Bildung. So it appears as a part of the world that people deal with in everyday life. Artificial intelligence basically appears as a part of reality in a post-digital world, as a part of reality that has been this way for a long time, and that has already become our normality. And in this normality, AI shapes our prejudgments. It is a part of the prejudices that generate our thoughts and actions. This is basically the premise that we are talking about. And then this is our pedagogical hope. It is our task in the learning interaction with artificial intelligence to behave in relation to these prejudices. So we can, through Bildung, see what our understanding of affairs of, for example, the functioning of artificial intelligence and the way it basically leads our use of whatever software or the internet. We can understand that, and we can also understand how, sorry, I lost the flow. We can understand how this is determined by our individual prejudices, and then try to shape them and also change these accustomed prejudices, maybe. So ultimately, Bildung means to steer and to try to direct our own learning also in dealing with artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is an important object of Bildung, of course, and one that will probably become more important in the future. But more importantly, by inscribing itself into the prejudice structure of individuals, AI changes their understanding of themselves and of the world as well. And that is where we think Bildung comes into or enters the stage. And therein lies the theoretical potential of artificial intelligence concerning educational research, we think. Now, within the project of THInKI, at the Chair of Historical Pedagogy and Global Education, we try to address one question, which is, shortly, see, I think we're already here. Oh, no, okay. We try to address the question of what it means to promote and also demand artificial intelligence in higher education. So what follows from this claim? In other words, what is meant to happen when higher education, also Hochschulbildung, involves artificial intelligence? And that leads me to the last part of my talk, which I will try to keep short also because this is a part of our work that we will start working on from December of this year. But we have an outline for that as well. We will do empirical research on the question of what is understood, what is the understanding of Bildung among all other participants of THInKI. And in concrete terms, we want to implement an accompanying educational research for the entire project. And the aim here is also to link the project partners at both locations in Ilmenau and in Jena by the means of this survey. And for this sub-project, we also have formulated guiding questions, which you can see here. These are: what is the implicit concept of Bildung with which the subprojects work, and also what are the consequences for this, for a realistic concept of Bildung that takes into account in everyday life dealing with artificial intelligence. So we basically take a pedagogical look at the work of all participating shares, basically. Well, this is to be done in the framework of the qualitative research. We plan to conduct narrative interviews with the respective contact persons from every sub-project, and finally evaluate the survey data with regard to the guiding questions. But we will get to that by the end of this year or next year, probably. Okay, this should be it for today. Maybe at the next ReDICo Tagung we can present some of our empirical research results then. And for now, I'd be glad to take questions and maybe feedback. Yeah.